Before we get started, we put it on the website and we put it on the consultation form where we start recording training sessions, Zoom sessions, and consultations. Sure. Okay. Quick, let's see. So I just read over your form real quick. Seems like standard obedience stuff. Recall.
Yep.
I think was one thing you put. This is one of the dog here. What was it? Porky and lab mix? Was
That's what I think, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's it's like I don't know if you saw that dog on the internet. It's a pit bull dachshund. So he's got the head of a pit bull. They even crop the ears, but he's got a long body like a dachshund. It's super goofy. Alrighty, so go ahead and fill me in here aside from like the recall stuff.
Yeah.
Just what you're trying to achieve here.
So we got him when we lived in Alaska, and obviously never had to leash train him. He's very good at, like, if we're out on a hike, he runs wrong, but he always comes back. Then we moved to New Hampshire, and we were right off the Appalachian Trail, so we could do a similar thing. And then we moved into the heart of Chicago, so he's never been properly leash trained, like walking around the city.
Noises.
So recall, and like there are some parks that we can take him off the leash around us, but then he just runs like crazy and doesn't really come when we want him to. And then just like on a walk through the streets, he stops every 10 feet, he doesn't come and like stay by our side. So it just becomes like a very frustrating walk.
Okay. What else?
I think like there's some fear of like the grates in the sidewalks, sounds of the L, and then he'll also like at water too, so like rushing water. So if it's either a drain, the ocean, a pool, he get like is super barky, and he's not normally like a bark kind of dog.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that's about it. Like major. It's like greeting. I think he'd be better at greeting people.
Okay. So jumping.
Yeah, some jumping.
Like my biggest concern is I want to enjoy taking him for a walk, and right now I don't, because he just stops every 10 feet. And he does have a little attitude where he like looks back
Oh, he'll look at you.
I'm not moving
Yeah.
and all that. So it's like I just want to get to a point where we can walk down the street.
Okay.
Love sticks. So when he's engaged in something, he will like sometimes acknowledge you, sometimes not acknowledge you as well. That's the issue I think at the park, so you just can't get him to come back.
Okay. So yeah, it's allowed. It's just either walking on a leash or come when I call you, right? No matter what you're doing, type of stuff.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Okay.
I'm assuming before reaching out, you did some research on me and my training methods and tools that I use.
Yeah, I did not share it in depth with Casey, so.
Okay. Oh, well, that's.
I have complete.
Sure. So I use pretty much just e-collar for all my dogs over 6 months. Under 6 months, we use food, clicker, positive reinforcement. It's puppies, like kindergarten stuff. But once a dog hits 6 months, or puppy hits 6 months, they can be trained to an adult level. So they can be trained to be off leash. Technically, you can train a dog as young as 2 months to be off leash, but it's just the notion of using an e-collar on a puppy for people, because of how they perceive it, most people aren't comfortable with it until 6 months, because by that point, the puppy's driven them crazy enough to like, okay, like, something that works, right? So, at 6 months and on, all my dogs are trained on the e-collar for a few reasons. One, right off the bat, you get off leash control, okay? Two, when we're working with behavior, reactivity, aggression, anything like that, it's a non-confrontational tool that allows us to stop the behavior. And depending on the case, I call it rewiring the dog to make them, or to get them as close to sociability as possible, or at least to allow the human or the owner to have as close to a normal life as possible with a dog like that. You think here, reliable recall. If you decide, okay, I'm not going to come today because I'm playing with my friends, or the stick is much more engaging, we can make the dog return to us. Also, in case of an emergency situation, throughout the years, I've been doing this for 10 years, I've heard lots of crazy stories. The most common one is like my dog took off because of a firework that someone just blew up randomly. And even in emergency situations, it's in my opinion, only tool that's going to allow you to regain control or get as close to 100% of control as possible, even in that kind of scenario. I really only approach things in the sense of like, I only teach what you're going to use. I know with other trainers, there's like a program, and I understand like there's a structure to things, but a lot of times people go into like, well, I learned all this stuff and it has no application to me, right? And they go, yeah, so I focus on the stuff they're going to want. It's definitely the heel and the recall are the two most important commands that every dog should know. The other thing is, it's super subtle. People tend to think e-collar is like you're electrocuting your dog, but it's not electrocution. It's not like sticking your finger in an outlet or electric chair or anything like that. It's a miniaturized TENS unit. Have you ever had stim therapy from a chiropractor or physical therapist? It's like these little circles, and they put on your muscles and they twitch your muscles.
Oh, yes, I have.
Okay, that's an e-collar. Okay, it's e-collar is just a miniaturized TENS unit. It's a muscle stimulator. So if you felt that, then you felt essentially a remote collar. So it's he would not feel anything going through his body. It's going to be centralized to where it's making contact. So on the e-collar, there's 2 probes that touch the neck, and those 2 probes are what causes the muscle to contract, but everything else would be unaffected. My Chihuahua is 8 pounds. He's trained on the e-collar. And my Chihuahua was actually super dog reactive when I got him because he was a feral dog. He lived the first year of his life completely outside, and then I had to housebreak him and crate train him and all that stuff. But so are you guys familiar with prong collar, like the spike-looking one? Mm-hmm. So prong collar, you have to correct the dog yourself. And despite his size, his intensity was great. So when I would correct him for reactivity, this little 8-pound dog, he would go spinning. But then he would go back to lunging and barking again. So even though I would correct him and you would see him spin, which most people would think, oh, that must have been enough. No, it would take about 2 to 3 of those before you'd actually cut the crap. With e-collar, you would barely know him even touching the butt. So even though the intensity is not there, his sensitivity to it is higher. So I don't have to be physically overpowering for him just because he's 8 pounds. I've used it on dogs with heart murmurs, seizures. I've used it on senior dogs, dogs with medical conditions, because I think I saw something about arrhythmia. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Is that an irregular heart pattern or something? Yes. Okay. Is that the heart murmur, or is it something separate?
I think it's different from a murmur.
Okay. So I don't know if I've come across that in the past, but should it be an issue? If you ask your veterinarian, they'll probably tell you not to, more so because they're biased against the collar, as opposed to, in my opinion, a scientific reason of why you shouldn't. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of just give my 2 cents there, and then you pick and choose what you do, but from experience, I don't think it would be a problem, okay? So, right off the bat, we get off leash control. Emergency situations, we can regain control. It's non-confrontational. You don't have to yank your dog, you don't have to pull your dog, you don't have to yell at your dog or anything like that. It's all done through the remote collar. His sensitivity, I don't know what it's going to be. It could be very low, it could be very high. Every dog is different. Size of dog, breed, none of that stuff matters. So I told you about my 8-pound Chihuahua. I have a client right now, I have 2 clients right now whose dogs are about roughly 15 pounds. One of them, the dog's number is 60 to 80 out of 127, to give you a reference. The other one is 15 to 20. Okay, but they're both the same size. So one is much more tough to the e-collar, whereas the other one is much more sensitive to it. Okay, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. That's just how they perceive it. So that's what we do the training. In the training session is I teach you from ground zero. I don't touch the dogs anymore. You have your dog, I'm coaching you through it, I'm there present with you, I guide you through everything. So you're learning completely hands-on. And then I give you your homework and then you practice, okay? Questions so far? So what makes the e-collar so effective is it allows us to match not only the dog, but the environment, okay? So like let's say he is playing with his friends, he's very distracted, he's very engaged. The stimulation level is high, is maybe the number is 65 to cut through all of that, and he goes, oh, like I need to actually do this. Or it could be 20. Or let's say he's, does he have any prey drive?
Yeah.
Yeah, squirrels. Let's say squirrels is his thing, right? That's like his ultimate reward. 65 is good enough for around dogs, but maybe not good enough around squirrels. So then we can override that. Maybe I gotta go to 95, maybe it's 100, or maybe it's 70. I don't know. We figure all that stuff out through training, but it allows you to override all the environmental stuff, as well as stress levels. So like when I mentioned earlier about the firework, when a dog goes into flight response, he's not thinking about being disobedient and not coming back to you. He's thinking, to survive. He doesn't know what that sound was, so his first instinct is, I'm gonna get away with this, or get away from this because I don't wanna die. So stress levels are up. So then essentially, in that scenario, it's making the dog more scared of running from you than they are running from the firework. And that's how we're able to override. Because the firework, it spooks them, and it's the thought of threat. right? But there's nothing concrete. But with the e-collar, it's physical. He's gonna feel that it allows us to override, to get the dog to return because he's going, oh, because it's against instinct for an animal to run into danger, right? Unless there's something incentivizing you, like you wouldn't run into a fire. But maybe to save a loved one, or to save your child, or save your dog, you would risk running into that fire. But typically it would be against instinct. There wouldn't be no purpose to do so. So that's where he's at. He's going, I don't know what that is, but I'm gonna take off from it. And you're going, no, you're gonna come back, okay? So, and as we go about this, there's a structure to it. The first thing we always teach is the heel, primarily because pulling is one of the most common things that people want to fix. I deal with a lot of aggression and reactivity cases, and it's the foundation for addressing reactivity and aggression. When a dog feels an e-collar, they tend to want to move, again, moving away from something, because he's thinking, I don't know what this is, I'm going to try to run off from it. We don't want to teach him to run away, we want to teach him to always come to, if anything. So, since it makes him move, heel is a moving behavior, right? You're walking, he's actively moving. Is when he feels the e-collar, his instinct to want to move in response, he's getting to do that still, because you're walking. So it allows him to express that need to move, while at the same time we get to teach him how it turns on and how it turns off, okay? So people tend to think of e-collar or prong collar as punishers, because they think that it's something bad. So most people would teach everything with food, and then they bring in the tool, and they go sit. The dog doesn't sit, and then they call it wrong, okay, or then they yank them. So that's punishment-based training. If you don't do this, this is going to happen, okay? What we do is pressure work. Have you ever pulled up and pressed down to make him sit before? Have you ever seen someone do that, to pull up on the collar and then press down on the butt to make the dog sit? That's pressure. That's physical pressure. It's leash and physical pressure, right? You're doing this, and as soon as he gives you what you want, you stop, right? You don't keep pulling or pushing. Same thing with the e-collar. E-collar is another form of pressure, okay? So every time he feels that twitch, it's a type of pressure. So we shape everything using the pressure. So he doesn't see it so much as a punisher as he does a communicator. So then he starts to think, hey, every time I get away from my owner, this thing goes off, but every time I come into my owner, it goes away. So then he starts to interpret what the e-collar means, and he starts to make decisions based upon the pressure. Because think of growing up, we had peer pressure, right? Have you guys drive? You've been on the expressway? You ever been where it's like someone's really close behind you, right? And it makes you feel uncomfortable. So you might either switch lanes, you might speed up, you might brake check, you might not do anything, right? That's spatial pressure. They're getting real close to you to incentivize you to do something, okay? It's the same thing here. E-collar is pressure, and we're shaping everything and we're guiding them into all the behaviors using the pressure, but as soon as he does the behavior, the pressure disappears. So he starts to think, oh, if I feel this and I feel this, if I do this, it disappears. And then if he gets up and we kick him with the pressure again, he goes back into the position, it disappears. So then he thinks, oh, if I put my butt in the ground, this discomfort that I feel goes away, and if I get up, it comes back, but if I sit back down, it goes away. So then he starts to think, oh, what happens if I just sit here and don't move? Nothing. So he goes, oh, okay, so I can avoid the pressure by giving into the command, or the pressure, or whatever, the guidance, and as long as I stay in that position, I can also avoid it, okay? So that's how we teach it. And I get dogs that have been trained like on e-collar, prong collar, and food-based training all the time. Is I always tell people, we have to reteach it. Because most people are still old school, punish the behavior if the dog doesn't do it. And I reshape everything from beginning to end using the pressure. So if I say sit and he goes boom, I don't do anything because he beat the punch. Okay? So for me, I always use the collar unless the dog moves fast enough to avoid the collar. Okay? So the way you layer it in kind of defines how the dog perceives the collar. It's the same exact sensation. It's the same exact tools and training tools and stuff. It's just how you apply it defines how the dog's going to interpret it. Okay? Questions?
Sounding good.
Let me think here. So we always start with the recall. I'm going to heel. That's typically 2 classes. And then by class 3, we're moving into recall. Okay, so heel tends to be the fastest thing that people teach because you walk your dog multiple times a day, at least 3, right? So it gives you 3 times a day 7 days a week for you to practice the heel, is that tends to get developed very quickly. The recall tends to be the longest because it requires you to go somewhere, requires you to put him on a long leash, let him be a dog, and then practice. But then if you practice recall too much, you'll start to see his desire to explore dip, because he's thinking, oh, every time I walk away from you, you should just call me back again. So he's like, I'm gonna just stick to you then, because I want to avoid the pressure. So it takes the longest because you have to go out and let him be a dog and intermittently practice a recall when you can, so that we don't kill his drive to want to explore. And every now and then we get a dog that's super like drivey, where you can call him 100 times and they'll always go back to go play, but it's rare. So we try to, it's easier to try to avoid the problem than to just practice a lot and see what happens. Because then once they get too nervous about leaving you, it takes time to get them comfortable again. For them to explore, which will take a couple weeks, it could take a month, and then it's like a month of not doing anything with recall to try to get him comfortable again. And then once he's ready, it's like, okay, now we can start recall again. So that's why it takes the longest. So it can take anywhere from a couple of months to 6 months. It also depends on how often are you practicing. Are you going every day? Are you going once a week? What are you practicing with? Are you only practicing recall in a land environment? Or are you practicing recall while he's playing with the dog, while he's chasing the squirrel, while he's running around zooming? All these things are factors on how effective his recall is going to be. So heel is 2 classes, recall is 2 classes, which then leaves 6, okay? 2, sorry. So we have 3, 6, 9, and 12-week programs. I would place, from what I'm hearing from you, you're like in the 6 class range, okay? So the 3-week program is for people whose dog, they just care about leash pulling and they care about reactivity. They just want to be able to walk their dog in peace and not worry about their dog lunging and barking. The 6-week program is, I walk my dog and we go to the park. The 9-week program is walk my dog, go to the park, go to restaurants. The 12-week program is we go hiking off leash, we're gonna go to the dog beach, we're gonna go to restaurants, leave the dog park. Like, you do like everything with your dog. So that's when we do full control. So there's 6 commands: sit, stay, down, come, place, heel, that are all meant to be functional. They're meant for you to do more things with your dog, okay? So the 2 basic ones and the 2 most important ones, of course, are the heel and the recall, in my opinion. The sit, stay, down, and place are kind of superficial, or they're more so personal preference. The one command that has to be off-leash reliable is recall, okay? The other ones, it's, again, personal preference. So with the 6 class program, and in any program, whenever we cover recall, you have the tools to make it reliable. You just have to practice, okay? Is the 6-week program to make sure to cover the recall, so you have all the information to make that off-leash reliable, but you're not gonna have off-leash reliability at the end of the program. You have to practice. You have the tools, but you have to put the time. The 9-week program, we push for like the heel and the recall to be off-leash reliable. And then the 12-week program is sit, stay, down, come, place, heel, built to off-leash reliability. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, because you're going for the full control. Questions about that?
I do like the sound of the whole breadth of commands, though. Just the idea of, like you mentioned, needing, if you go to like a dog beach or situations that are not just walking him, I think would be helpful. Just thinking out loud now.
And that's personal preference.
Yeah.
From what I heard before, I categorized you as 6, but if you're like, no, I want the full 12, you can do that as well.
Well, it's funny with him because it's so context dependent, and I guess based on environment and his experience, but because we've done so much off-leash hiking, where if we're on a hike and we call him, he comes and sits right next to us. Like say someone else is approaching with the dog, we'll call him, we'll put him on the leash, and he's good as soon as they pass, take him off. And he's good. So in that environment, he's 100% recall trained, but then if you take him to a dog park, he's like closer to 0%
Sure.
recall trained. So it's just funny where like he has some of the foundations there, and some he.
Yeah, so that's where the stimuli come into play. Because like you said, a dog park, right, where there's like 18, 15 other dogs or whatever, a lot more stuff going on, as opposed to like a forest preserve or a trail where you'll come across the occasional dog, right? But also, it's like, for us, going to a bar, you expect it's going to be loud, right? There's going to be drinking and all that stuff, right? But then if you go to like a quiet restaurant, you would, like a restaurant that you know to be quiet, you wouldn't expect it to be loud. Does that make sense? So for him, he's going like at the dog park, it's kind of like the bar. social, a lot more stuff going on. But when it's the forest preserve, it's the occasional thing. So he's going more so towards, like you said, the context there. With the remote collar, it doesn't matter what the environment is. You know, whether you go from one new park to another park, to a new dog park, right, is the obedience and the control is meant to be effective despite the environment, okay? Now, one of the most common things that I get asked is, well, one, when does the e-collar go away? But then two, like, why doesn't the dog learn to be a good dog? I mean, just like, do the stuff. And for the first question with the e-collar, in my opinion, when you need it, it doesn't, okay? So if you're gonna be at the dog park, he has the collar on. If you're gonna be at a restaurant, he has the collar on. If he's gonna be off leash anywhere that's unenclosed, he's got the collar on, okay? And you know him better than I do, so you said, well, when we go to the trails, he's been 100%. That might be a setting where you don't have it on, right? My personal preference is whenever I'm outside of this building, wherever I'm outside of home, my collar is on, because I can account for life. You know, the random fireworks that go off, dogs charging your dog off leash that may not be friendly.
That one time you chased the fox.
Time you chase the fox, you know,
Yeah.
stuff like that that you're not expecting. But it's not that you're always using it. It's just that it's present just in case something happens. It's like I have the ability to regain control or get as close to 100% control back, despite, you know, the kind of emergency scenario. And I've had people's dogs get confronted by like coyotes in the city. It's super rare, but it happens. Fireworks, off-leash dogs is a big one here in Chicago. Dog attacks, unfortunately. I had a client, she goes to Oz Park with her dog to play fetch. And her dog and another dog went after the ball at the same time and started a fight. And then she just jacked up her collar and remoted, and her dog pulled out 180, just ran right out within like a half a second or a second of the fight starting. And she felt really bad because her dog yelped. But I was like, well, if you tried to stop the fight yourself, you could have potentially been bitten. Or two, if you would let the fight continue, you could have a vet visit right now. The dogs the fight stopped with the dogs, no dog harm and all that. So those things that you just don't expect or plan for, it allows you again to just kick in and be able to have that control. Question? So the other thing is dogs are opportunistic, or all animals are. It's part of survival instinct. So like as humans on the expressway, most people speed. No one really goes the speed limit, but then when you see a squad car, all of a sudden everybody slows down, right? Because now there's no consequence. So I refer to the collar as a cop on a collar. Is it Huxley?
Yeah.
Huxley here is gonna be aware, okay, that cop is present, so I have to be compliant and I have to be well behaved, right? But then when you remove it, you expect him to push things a bit. But if he's inside the house, he's a great dog. Like you don't need it. If he's great when people come over, you don't need it. It's really just when you go on your walks, if he's going to be off leash anywhere, if you're going to take him outside to the restaurant or something, that it's just present to kind of keep him in check, and then also just to give you the ability to control in case something happens. The other thing would be training a dog to the degree where you wouldn't need it, right? If you go on the internet, you see these like really, really well trained dogs. There's always a couple of things that people don't notice. One is typically a bland environment. You know, they're like in an open space. If it's outside, you'll see like an empty field or something like that, or they're inside a building. There's nothing going on, but you see the dog doing all these fancy things, like yeah, because they're not outside in public. Or you're looking at someone's dog that belongs to a professional trainer, and they've put in thousands or countless of hours into their dog from 2 months old to 2 years to 3 years old to get to that level of responsiveness. Like my dogs, they don't need the e-collar. I can have my dogs off leash and stuff. But if something happened, like a firework, I know my dog would take off because she's scared of fireworks. And that actually happened to me here in Logan Square. I was walking along the boulevard and I had my dogs on a leash. I didn't have collars on because they weren't going to go off leash. And someone set off a firework in my pit. Freaked out. She got super anxious and got super flighty. So then I had to walk 2 miles back with her in panic mode because I had no means of calming her down or de-escalating her. But for sure, if I didn't have leashes on them, she would want to take off. So stuff like that happens, unfortunately. Let me think here. How much does this guy weigh?
38 pounds?
No, it's up to like 42.
Is it 42 now?
That's a little familiar with.
City
Little
limit.
city weight, yeah.
Yeah. So the collar I would put him on is most likely the Dogtra 2300. It's meant for 70 pounds and under. There's one meant for 35 pounds, but you'd rather opt for a little bit more because you want to think emergency situation. You know, so like let's say he responds really well with a smaller collar. That's in a controlled context, right? But then if something happens that spooks him, the output is different. There's not as much power. So then if there's an emergency and you're trying to override the emergency, since he's already a bigger dog than the collar really is recommended for, it's going to be harder there. With the 70-pound and under collar, you have a lot more leverage. So all it means is you get more output from less on the dial. So on the smaller one, his number could be 40. On the bigger one, his number could be 20. Okay, so it just gives you a little bit more of a window there in terms of control. And then in case of an emergency, because it's meant for larger dogs or up to a 70-pound dog, you have enough power there to override a situation if needed. Okay. The collar itself runs about 287-ish with tax. It's a 3/4 mile range, fully waterproof system, both the transmitter and the receiver. They last a really, really long time. I've had mine for 8 years, no issues, other than the batteries are rechargeable lithium battery. So it's like your cell phone. After so many charges, you know, a couple of years the battery gives. You can go on the website and you can either buy the battery and replace it yourself, or if it's under warranty still, you can call the dog truck and then tell them like, hey, we'd like to send our collar in to be repaired. And then you send it in and they replace the battery and all that stuff and you get it back and it's good to go. Okay, but that's the most common thing that we get. Otherwise, sometimes people drop their remotes and stuff and then you'll see the dial gets kind of wonky or the numbers will kind of be jumping all over the place. So it goes 0 to 127 in increments of 1, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 127. So if that happens, you would just call Dogtra, send it in, they will repair it for you and then send it back. Okay, but I've been using them since I started my career 10 years ago. In my opinion, they're the best training collar there is. You'll find other models that are cheaper, especially they're like 30, 80 bucks. They're garbage. You don't want to get those type of those collars. They either will crap out after a month, or the deliverance is different. It will not feel like a 10 unit. It's going to feel more unpleasant. And I felt them myself. I felt 4 out of 100 and it made my hand jerk. And then I would need like 40 or 60 on my collar to match the intensity of 4 on that collar. Okay? So even though it goes to 100, I'm like, well, if that's 4, what is 100 then? You know? So, let me think here. Other questions?
I guess after a consultation like this, when do you typically start with people?
Oh, so that all depends on your availability. So my evenings and weekends, I'm reverse of people, because most people are 9 to 5. So I'm usually evenings and weekends are my busiest times. If you have daytime availability, I would expect you can get in sooner, but I know even my days are pretty booked up right now too. Once 21 kicked in, like everything got super busy. There could be as long as a 2 to 4 week wait in terms of getting on the calendar. But again, that just all comes down to your availability versus mine. And Maria would get all that squared away with you. I don't comment on my calendar because it changes every day.
Gotcha.
You know, people cancel, we get reschedules and stuff like that. But the way it works is, like, let's say you did the 12 weeks, you would have your start date, whatever, you figured out with Maria, and then let's say you did like Saturday at 2 o'clock. Saturday at 2 o'clock is your time for 12 weeks plus 1. Okay, no one can take that time for you, so we would give you what we call priority. So that's your time frame. But like, let's say you reschedule or cancel, you get sick a couple of times, whatever, and we hit 13 weeks of priority time, but you have 2 classes left over. If that time slot is still free, we just finish up the classes. Because my weekends and evenings are busier, we have someone that needs that time, Maria would tell you like, hey, you know, you use up your priority, you still have 2 classes left. These are other times that we have available because we have to book this time for a new client. Okay. And we do that. So if you did 6, you would get 7 weeks priority. If you did 9, you do 10 weeks priority. If you do 12, you get 13 weeks priority.
And is there the ability to say start with 6 and then as things progress, add on or?
You can, but it's gonna be the same rate.
Okay.
So like, let's say I think 6 is like 950 off the top of my head. So if you did 6, you would do 950. If you did another 6, it would be another 950, right? If you do 12, which that adds up to 1900, I think. If you do 12 off the bat, I think it's like 1675. So there's a discount if you commit up front, and then you can always do 6 and then another 6. I had a client last year that did 12, did 6, and then took a break over winter and is coming back in the summer to finish the next 6 because they just wanted the discount. So, but it didn't have to be all at once. They just had to commit at the beginning, and then they just did their 6 and then they did the last 6.
And if I was understanding you correctly, is it that some of the behaviors we're seeing, for example, if we're walking down the street and, you know, the grate that's near subway lines, or if you know, he's moving to avoid those, if we're like in heel mode, that should take care of that kind of behavior. So we're not necessarily addressing the discomfort. It's like you're training him through that discomfort.
So that's, okay, so that's a good question. So there's certain things that I can expect a dog would do and certain things that I don't. It makes sense why he's freaked out about all the city stuff, right? Because he's used to like a more outdoorsy, quiet, nature-esque environment, correct? And now we're in Chicago. So we can help him over things. So like, for instance, my chow mix. So all my dogs are from Texas. They're all from south, like an hour away from Mexico, Texas, okay? Super small town, super quiet. So when they first moved here, there was a lot of anxiety because it was a complete 180 from what they knew. My chow mix, to this day, will not walk over a grate. But it's not a problem. She just like jumps over it or she'll avoid it, which technically is breaking the heel command, but she hops right back into the heel, okay? When it comes to the train, because I think that was something you noted in the forum, is we can't make him like the train, okay? And it can go a couple of ways. The one, technically in that scenario, because he's not having to walk over anything, he has to more so walk under something, right? Is, in that scenario, you can expect for him to stay at your hip in the heel position. However, if the stress of the train is greater, you're not going to get perfection. It's more so just like it allows him to go through without like him like going ahead, right? Okay. And he's more controlled. And then once you pass it up and you're half a block away, his nerves will settle, and then he's good. Okay. In some cases, the dogs are able to do it. It's a mixed bag. I can't tell you how it's going to work out, but it would be better. Okay, but don't expect them to ever go like, oh, I like trains now, because it's just completely foreign to him. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the stuff that you noted, the only one, because there was grates, I think that's sewers or something like that, like those the manholes. Yeah. Because for him, that's not natural to the world. You know, that's all human stuff. So that's why their dogs are kind of apprehensive about things like that. Not the end of the world, unless it was leading to like a very, like let's say every time he saw a grate, he tried to take off. Then I'll say, okay, that's something we got to address because he could potentially get off the leash and run away. But if it's just he avoids it and stuff, it's not the biggest problem.
Yeah, because I think one thing that leads to some of that frustration on walking is that he will also just like stop.
Yeah, that would be fixed.
Yeah, okay.
That can be fixed, that's not a problem. Okay. Because what happens is, and it's natural to see that too, even just with e-collar, because when dogs feel pressure, they tend to want to like again, move away from it or avoid it. So what happens is, if he shuts down and he goes, I'm not going to move, you just lightly pull on the leash, 5, 20, 10, 15, 20 inches, gradually go up on the collar, and eventually the physical discomfort of the collar is going to override the emotional discomfort of moving, not wanting to move forward. And he's going to pop forward. As soon as he pops forward, everything disappears. And then we go back to our normal numbers. I see it all the time. It's like one of the easiest things to fix. You know, dogs that are afraid to hop into cars or hop out of cars, scared to hop into pools. I had a dog that came in and he was scared of walking on tile like this. Different textures, so we got him over that in a class. So that's an easy fix.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions? Pretty much everything is done through remote collar. We don't need to use food. But if I see like if he's too insecure or something because he's never felt pressure like this before, we may add it in just to kind of balance things out. I usually start off with the e-collar first, and then once you're fluent enough in it, we can add in the food as a reinforcer if needed. And it's just to get them comfortable with things. It's not, I've trained some, like 95% of my dogs are trained on e-collar only, no food. So,
Yeah, I find him not that food motivated.
Yeah, we did a few weeks. I would carry little treats on every walk, and every time he did, like, tell him to come and give him a treat, it doesn't correct any behavior.
yeah. So for positive reinforcement, it's not for correcting, it's for reinforcing.
Yeah.
So like, let's say you said, Huxley come, and he didn't come to you, there's no means of correction there. But let's say he did come to you, you would feed, so that's the reinforcer. So the not coming part is like where the e-collar comes in. So aversives are meant to stop things or to make things happen in the sense of like, if you don't do this, I can make you respond because I have pressure available. So like growing up, I was raised old school, I was spanked. So motivator for doing my homework was if I didn't do my homework, I got spanked. If I didn't do the dishes, I got spanked. If I talk back to my mom, I got spanked, right? So that negative or that positive punishment that like okay, I don't want to get spanked, so I better do my chores, or I better not, or don't talk back to my mom. So aversives can do both stop things, but also motivate things. But it just depends on how you labor it. Dogs are, as a human, because I'm aware, mom says, if you don't do your homework tonight, I'm going to spank you. I can tie that together and completely avoid the punishment by just doing my homework. That doesn't happen for this guy. We can't say like, hey, Huxley, we're going to the dog park. If you don't come back, I'm going to spank you. He's not going to process that and think to himself, like, all right, I'm going to be really compliant with the dog park today because I don't want to get spanked, right? So that's where the collar comes into play. But that's why we have to teach everything with pressure, because you can't punish not coming. It'll actually just make him move off even more. So we have to condition him to think, when I feel this, it means to come here. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And if you go to our YouTube channel, did you watch any of our training videos? Yeah. So those are good examples where you can see just like to get a frame of reference, because it can be difficult for people to to understand how e-collar works, because we're so punishment thinking. But once you see the process, it makes sense. Other questions?
No.
I think I'm good.
I was going to say too, yeah, I think we're both fully aware that a big part of it is ourselves getting trained in proper training techniques. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah,
and I would coach you through it. So I don't, like I said, I don't touch the dog anymore. It's very simple. It's very logical. I'll give you, how do you say, you have your homework, and then you come back. So week 1 is always the first half to heal. Week 2, what do we see? Hey Jesse, he walks great 90% of the time. When's that last 10%? Oh, when we're walking to the dog park. He's too excited, he really wants to go there. Okay, this is how we're going to override the walk to the dog park, because it doesn't matter where he's going, he should glue your hip. Then we work on the second half of heal, give you some more homework, you come back, how to go, we fix the problem, his heel is great, okay great, let's jump into recall now. Okay, and then and also in terms of picking your program, if you do 6 to add on 6, but your intention is to do 12, I would have you tell me, because I structure the programs differently. Because if someone comes to me with a 6-class program, I'm thinking, okay, I got to get all this done within a short time frame, that I skip stuff. But if you're telling me we're doing 12 off the bat, then it's going to be a different structure. So if I think you're only doing 6, we cover heal, we cover recall for sure, and the last 2 would be what do you want to do. If you say we're doing 12, we teach sit, stay down, come, place, heal, the first 6 classes, and then the next 6 classes is let's transfer everything to make it off-leash reliable. Okay, so it's a little bit of a slightly different structure. And before I forget, so about the priority thing, is I get some clients that do straight 12 through, okay? And I get other clients that, it's usually about class 9 or 10, that we have everything down. I've already taught you how to transfer everything to the long leash to practice towards off leash. Is you need time to practice and screw up and make mistakes and see where he's having issues. So it's optional. You can either continue with your program or come in class 9 or 10, I'll talk to you and say like, how do you want to do this? And if you decide like, hey, we would like to split up these classes, I would say, okay, we're gonna take you off your priority time. And then when you're ready, you schedule your 10th class. And it could be 2 weeks later, it could be a month later. In the summertime, you do want to book ahead of time. Otherwise, you might come back 3 weeks later and then have to wait another 2 weeks before I have an opening. Because during the week before it pops up, life happens, you know, you get sick or whatever, and you're doing week by week by week, you may not always have the time to practice, right? So pushing the last classes further apart allows you to go out and do more stuff, go to new places, and then see where you're needing to kind of improve. And then we tackle those things. So by the time we hit that 12th class, a lot of times people are already just off leash at that point, which is kind of making observations, making sure we're not doing anything correctly.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Sounding wonderful.
Yeah, so I don't think there's nothing out the ordinary here, pretty standard stuff. I think it's just going to be the, you can mull over what you want to do, 6, 9, or 12, and then we'll take it from there.
So I would just email Maria.
You can email Maria. Okay. Don't be discouraged if you don't hear back from her for a couple of days.
Oh,
okay?
that's okay, yeah.
Because we have another client who's been waiting 3 weeks. But I was like, there's a 2 to 4 week wait right now, you know, to get into the calendar and stuff. But you can email her and let her know.
Okay.
And then if you don't hear back from her, she's really good about responding. Sometimes people, they also get caught up in things that they don't see her email, they open it and forget about it, and they think she hasn't responded, but really she has. So if you know, like, hey, this sounds good, we want to sign up, you can turn around and tell her 12 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever, and she'll just kind of start that queue. She'll send you a form. Once your form is submitted, our contract form, that's when she's like, okay, you're ready to go. Okay, otherwise, if you're just talking back and forth, you know, we have other clients that are already submitting the forms and she's going first come, first serve.
Okay.
And then when it comes to the collar, you can purchase them on Amazon and she'll send you the information. You can also purchase them from us. We just started selling them ourselves now. If you purchase through us, if something happens with your collar within 30 days, like let's say it's a dud or something, you just let me know. We'll swap out your collar with the new collar. I'll take care of that with myself with Doctra.
Okay.
If it's after 30 days, you can send it to Doctra to be repaired, and we'll provide you with the loaner. So this way you don't go without collar. If you go with Amazon, it should be the same price, but Amazon undercuts a lot of people. There would be, I think it's like a 2 to 3 week turnaround if you have to submit your collar in for your repair. Okay? But you have a couple of options. I don't care where you get your collar, but I do care that you get the appropriate collar because that will affect the training. Okay? Anything else?
Appreciate your time today.
No, I appreciate you guys coming by. If you have any questions that you forgot to ask, you're always more than welcome to let us know. Otherwise, you know, feel free to contact Maria. Otherwise, I'll email her and give her the information. She'll relay the information to you, and then she'll get you guys all squared away.
Wonderful.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
And then did you find the parking at the end of the building fine?
Oh, we parked on the street.
Okay.
I probably didn't note that.